Welcome. In this session, we will talk about the down to earth edition for August 1st to 15. Now, the very first topic that has been discussed talks about the melting glaciers and the whole of the cryosphere, which includes the glaciers, the lakes, the ice sheets, the permafrost, is being threatened. And the major threat is that by 2050, most of the Arctic Sea would vanish. Now, what would happen? This would actually unleash the microbes that are present and even the antimicrobial resistance genes. Now, what would be a major threat is that when this water goes down, these chemicals which are leached into the soil, and when the water flows through it, the chemicals which are there would get dissolved into the water. Now, this water would go into the food chain and ultimately creating toxic elements for human consumption. So, this would be a very we could say detrimental to human health, right? Again, the important thing is how we can reduce it. So some of the recommendations says that if black carbon is reduced, then definitely the pace at which the ice caps are melting would reduce. Also, we would have to reduce and regulate the tourism in this region and accelerate more research so that the cryogenic microorganisms can be protected. So nearly 40% of the permafrost is at threat as of now, and what we have done so far is there have been nearly 62,000 plus big dams which are already established on the major rivers worldwide, and this has disrupted the flow of sediment, the fish migration, the water quality, ultimately creating a threat to the water resilience system. Now again, if we talk about the age group 65 and above, they are at the most vulnerable position. The major reason is that they are the ones which are most affected by climate change. If we talk about the 1990s, the baseline was somewhere at close to zero. Current trend says that there has been an increase in the heat related deaths by 85, and it is projected by the 2025 it would rise to 370, which is a very significant figure. So those are some of the important things that we must take into account. The next is the 2030 agenda. Now, the UN 2025 report talks about the slowdown that we have seen. The progress towards the sustainable development goals have either slowed or come to a standstill, and here are some of the critically affected goals, which include zero hunger, quality education, clean water, good life for economic growth, and reduced inequality. And we have seen that most of the cases, around 35% of the total targets, are either regressing or not have been met. If we talk about the global hunger, which is under the sustainable development goal 2, we would see that 2019 witnessed somewhere close to 7.4%, and it is seen that by 2023 this figure has gone beyond 9%. 23% of the sub-Saharan African population is facing hunger, and nearly 281 million people in South Asia are globally affected by hunger and related things. Similarly, the economic growth, if we say the informal sector has grown very high in contrast to the formal sector, and in line with all of these, what we need is better education, better employment opportunities, and for sustainable development goal 2, which is hunger, we need to have better access to energy, affordable energy, and better food systems which could be provided. The next is the Mediterranean region is facing extreme heat waves. The temperatures have gone by 8 degrees higher, which are above the sea level as the normal in the month of July, and there have been more than 2,000 fatalities across Europe which have been affected or which have occurred because of heat related injuries. Now, June saw formations of heat dome in the regions of Mediterranean. Later in the June, we saw the first major heat wave, and early in the July, we saw that these impacts of the heat waves were further rising and escalating over the time. Now, the extreme temperatures in the regions of Portugal, Spain, France, you could say all of these, the temperatures have gone somewhere above 42 degrees Celsius, which is in itself a very high temperature for European region. The next is the maritime heat waves. Now the regions in the ocean which has been, as per the Mercator Ocean International, there has been a record breaking rise in the heat waves in the Mediterranean region. The severe heat waves have affected nearly 62% of the sea waters, and this has led to the fallout for the economy. So Spain, France and Germany are worst affected because they have a very high electricity demand because of higher air conditioning usage. Now this impacts the GDP of the country. There has been tourist disruptions in the country. Many of these survive specifically on tourism, and there has been significant losses to the agriculture and the food variety because they have a very narrow range at which they can survive. Now this hotter months are expected to continue till the month of September, and this would further create escalating situation which could be further detrimental. Now in India, if we talk about the green revolution which was brought by MS Swaminathan, we have seen a significant increase in the total electricity installed which has been seen because of the non-fossil fuels, and this has increased by 50%. Now of the total 484 gigawatts, we have 242 gigawatts which is based on non-fossil fuel. Now under the non-fossil fuel, the largest share goes to renewable sources of energy, followed by hydropower and nuclear power, and of the total capacity we could say it's 50-50 distribution as of now. Also India has seen an exponential growth in solar power capacity by increase in nearly 4000%. So in 2004 it was somewhere at around 2 gigawatts, which has increased to nearly 116 gigawatts as of 2024. So there has been significant increase in solar energy in India, specifically in the agricultural sector, with PM Kusum, PM Suryaghar solar parks being established and hybrid policy for wind solar projects being established. Now for the future, we have definitely non-fuel capacity to increase by 500 gigawatts, that's the target, and for 2070 we are targeting a net zero carbon emission. Now coming on to the global fight against trans fat. If we talk about the annual deaths which are being attributed to the consumption of trans fat, a simple example could be dalda ghee. Now this has been attributed to somewhere around 278,000. Now this has been the sources as per quoted by WHO. There has been a global mark on specific targets to low income nations where animal sourced foods are very vital, and some of the industrial trans fats include baked products, processed food, reused frying oils, vanaspati ghee, and then the purpose is to have better shelf life, to bring the things at lower cost, so it increases problems like diabetes, obesity and heart related diseases. There are trans fats which are naturally occurring. These are in milk, cheese, butter, animal fat. So these are actually the ones which are essential for the body. They are actually present in lower amount, so they are associated with less health risk, and some of the studies do suggest that they can also protect you against type 2 diabetes. Now if we talk about the comparison between natural and industrial trans fat, we could say the danger lying for the industrial trans fat is very high because the attributed deaths are somewhere around 2.7 lakhs, and for the healthy trans fats which are naturally occurring, we do not see any such pictures. So WHO has limited the maximum trans fat intake, and that is a very meager proportion of your total intake. That's just 1%. The rest of the energy intake should be non-trans fat, and therefore if there is a significant undernutrition with packed and processed food, the problems of obesity, heart diseases and diabetes would be further rising. Now there has been a timeline shift that had been adopted. So WHO started the Replace program in 2018 to eliminate the industrially produced trans fat. In 23 this elimination goal was not met, so there was another report that was brought, and in 2025 WHO clearly stated that there is a clear-cut difference between the industrial trans fat versus the natural trans fat. Now there are measures which have been implemented by various nations. For example, Denmark has brought up legislation to limit industrial trans fat to just 2 grams per 100 grams of the fat. And New York City has brought that there would be an immediate ban on industrial trans fat in all restaurants for healthy, affordable and available food production, food availability for the people. So there could be such things that could be brought. The next is on the coast of Kollam. We have seen that there has been offshore mining clashes which we have come across between the fishing community and the local people there. And most of the important things in the regions of Kerala is actually the first ever auction of the first offshore sand mining blocks which have been brought, and this is a move towards sustainable construction solutions. So the fishing community has proposed this as a threat. Now there has been a sand for auction of the Kerala coast which is somewhere around 300 million tons, and there have been 3 blocks under which it has been demarcated. Now these 3 are 30 kilometer offshore, and fishing industry is actually feeling that this could be a threat to the fishing grounds. Their habitats could be destroyed. There could be significant coastal erosion which could be affecting the region. Now if we talk about the domino effect here, that is one thing affects another, that further affects another, and ultimately the whole thing collapses, right? So the things here include the higher turbidity would be there. This would lead to the harm to the coral reefs. The seabed would be destructed, ultimately leading to depletion of the nutrients and finally affecting the fish life. And therefore the fishers are the ones which are worst concerned about this. Now there have been various things which have been concerned here. These include the auction for the blocks that have been seen for sand mining. Also there have been large scale protests, and fishery community has been working forward to bring in a successful solution for it. But there has been not just this, there has been case studies from other parts of the world as well considering the same thing. Now the polar prediction talks about amplifying the Arctic area, where the Arctic oceans are being considered warming at a very high rate, and this has been seen that we are seeing that the model talks about the observed reality which is somewhere declining, but the prediction says that the Arctic Sea has shown a significant decline, and this would further show a decline. In the Southern Ocean, the areas are getting more warmer, more saltier than expected. So this has created a domino effect again in the oceans, where the ocean currents are creating heat distribution patterns. They are being warmed at a higher pace, that is leading to the local collapse of the ecosystem, the bleaching of the corals, release of more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, leading to rise in the temperatures. So there has to be a better prediction, better model and better collaboration that needs to exist. The next is a very interesting study which was found, which was regarding the conservation of alpine musk deer in captivity. However, it has been found that there has been no successful program that has been released to conserve the alpine musk deer at any cost. Now the scientific name for the alpine musk deer and Himalayan musk deer are given. They are important for your examination. Alpine musk deer is critically endangered, and Himalayan musk deer is seen in the regions of west to east Himalayas, specifically in the regions of alpine. There are major breeding centers which have been significantly proposed at the regions of Darjeeling and Chopta. However, they have been mainly for the Himalayan species, not for the alpine musk, which is already under a critically endangered species. So this has been a highlighted situation since 2014. The species have been misidentified. There has been an incorrect founder stock leading to the failure of the program, and finally we have found that there has been no alpine musk deer in captivity. So when we are talking about this critically endangered species, it is at a significant verge, right? So the major goal is to identify 250 individuals, target them for a genetically healthy captive program, and then understand that this species comes out of the critically endangered species program. The next is the push for energy efficiency. So our projected energy demand would increase by 33% by 2030, and this is mainly from the consumptions which is seen through air conditioning and water pumps in India. Now cooling and pumping, both of these have become very, very important. The reason being the climate change, there has been higher heat waves, and as a result the consumption and the sales of ACs have increased from somewhere around 8.4 million in 2021 to nearly 10 million in 2024. So that is where we say a projected 1 billion plus ACs would be there in India by 2050, and the role of the inverter has further increased in 2023 by 77% of the total proportion being dependent on inverters. Now all this has led to higher energy push, and there has been the peak power demand which has already been rising, and it is believed that this peak power would further rise significantly by 2030. So energy consumption could grow, has already in the last decade grown by 63%, and it is believed that there could be a further 33% rise in the next 5 years. So there has to be various voluntary and mandatory programs that should be brought specifically related to consumption, energy efficiency, and the ICER standards for ACs must be introduced, with mandatory standards being brought in many parts. Now, if we talk about the urban areas, the streets have gone with a temperature of 1 to 2 degrees higher. That is because of the urban cooling effect. Because of the ACs, the heat which is released from the outer unit actually heats the atmosphere further. And this is what is called as a rebound effect, because you are cooling inside but you are heating outside. And that's a simple way to explain it. Now, this has further led to a condition where there could be an explosion in the electricity load, which we could see from 2017 to 2025. We have already seen an increase of nearly double, and it is believed that this could further double in the next 5 years. So there has to be a proactive plan that has to be brought specifically for reducing the cooling demands and bringing India's climate strategy at par. So with 1 degree change, the power of 1 degree we could say is very, very important, because if you are setting the AC temperatures to 22 degree, 24 degree, 26 or 28, you can see the relative consumption and the reduction in the relative consumption that has been seen. Okay, so this is where we can say that for every 1 degree increase in the thermal settings, the electricity consumption is being affected. Now, if we talk about some of the global policies, Japan is mandating a minimum temperature of 28. Spain is again having regulated settings. India has talked about setting somewhere between 24 to 27. With smarter designs, we can say more than 7 degree of the ambient temperature reduction can be seen from passive architecture, and then we can improve the housing, shift the habits, we can have some of the common areas, and then national building code could be brought into account. The next is again for pumping, for water being pumped out, we are using a huge amount of electricity. We have nearly 21 million plus agricultural pump sets which are already there. Most of them are outdated and their efficiency is only about 30%. We are the third largest electricity consumer in terms of agriculture and irrigation, and there has been a 46% increase in the demand so far. So if we talk about agriculture, we have nearly 80% of the pumps which are being used for agriculture and only 20% which is being used for household or municipal sector, and the inefficiencies is somewhere at around 67,000 crores which are being given as subsidies to the farmer, and this is because of the inefficiencies, as most of the electricity setups and the irrigation pumps are working at lower efficiency than the basic efficiency. So BEE talks about the star rating. So baseline level is somewhere at around 10% efficiency. However, star rating ensures 30% improvement. And we have seen for the submersible pumps, there has been standard benchmarks which had been lowered for 23-24, and then they have new benchmarks which have been established. So stricter norms could be brought in, and then better pump sets could be brought to make the system more efficient and more viable. The next is the bar which we are putting up must be raised for energy consumption. Now Japan is having a highest performance product on the market as mandatory efficiency standard. South Korea is again reaching the benchmarks for the same. So what is the ambitious plan that Japan and South Korea is following, and a cautious plan that India needs to follow? So we have come across with the schemes like Ujala scheme for LED consumption, which are super efficient. Similar efficiency must be brought with air conditioning, with water pumping, and the AC granularity must be checked, because the star rating, if it's being checked properly, it would actually discourage the manufacturers, and there would be only quality products coming into market, which would again be better efficient and would have lesser outer temperature rise that could be seen. So stronger policy actions, better incentives, and better implementation would be required. Now the next is the forests in India. Now there has been cases in the first 4 months of 2025 where Chhattisgarh has seen many major forest fires in 4 years, and there have been overall nearly 19,000 and more wildfires which have been affecting the region. And it is a very important thing that we need to understand the Forest Right Act of 2006, which talks about the Community Forest Resource Act, shifting from a traditional approach, which is a top-down government approach, to a community-friendly, community-led Gram Sabha model, where people are directly responsible for bringing up their community. So the Chhattisgarh story is very, very important. There are nearly 4,000 villages which have this CFRR titles, and they are empowering people to work for the environment with nearly 2 million hectares which has come under community management. The case study of Kalajhar village is very, very important. There has been rights which have been secured for 1,600 hectares of land, and this has been with the fire lines, with the restoration of the ecosystem, checking the illegal logging, checking out the health of the forest, and increasing the community income through minor forest agricultural produce. So this case study is very, very important even for students for forestry and for agriculture. So we would be covering those kind of case studies in your answer writing separately. The next is the GM cotton. Now GM cotton has been debatable since long. We have 50% of the surveyed farmers who are using illegal HT seeds for the last 5 years, and we have seen that the proportion of the legal and the illegal use of the seeds have been very, very similar. So HT is the herbicide tolerant species. Now why farmers are taking this risk? Because they are actually understanding the fact that there is labor shortage for manual weeding in many cases. It is better for pest resistance. There is dissatisfaction with the approved BT cotton which has been released into the market, and easier weeding control with glyphosates have been seen in this case. So there are informal producers, local distributors, which are ultimately leading to farmers. So two of the illegal varieties includes Yugam 5G and Bahubali 4G, which did not come through the official channel but has been used through the under network. And then this problem is beyond one district. We have seen this in Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So a regulated system and a draft approach must be brought forward to control and prohibit this case. The next is the disaster and the impacts of disaster. So we have already seen that climate induced migration would be one of the major threats to the economy, but we are also seeing that this climate related disasters like droughts, floods, landslides, cloudburst, the ones that we are seeing recently in the regions of Uttarkashi, Himachal Pradesh, are affecting the livelihoods. Now families are facing poverty, displacement, insecurity in terms of food, and there is no other coping mechanism but to engage their child into marriage at an early age, that is to reduce their own economic burden, and this is leading to higher cases of child marriage, leading to a disproportionate burden on girls, where the girls are pulled from schools, and we have seen that 80% of the girls are being affected in the areas which are affected by climate disasters. There has been an increase of 40% in child marriage cases. Also, some of the most vulnerable areas include Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan and India. India higher than the Pakistan average, and there has to be gender focused policies, community led approach, education access and better systemic means to tackle this issue. The next is in Europe. In Europe, there are rivers which are being liberated, and this is a constant effort that has been going on. So, excuse me. In 2024, barriers for nearly 500 plus rivers have been removed. So a new record with 23 countries are now participating in it. 25,000 kilometers of EU rivers are now flowing free under the natural restoration law, and it has been affecting nearly 1.2 million barriers which have been fragmenting the river. So the annual barriers which are being removed have increased from 100 in 2020 to somewhere more than 500 in 2024. The top countries which are bringing this change includes Finland, France, Spain, Sweden and UK. And this is that through this project, the projected global river fragmentation by 2030, we would see that this is somewhere around 89% of the total volume. So if the current trend in dam construction continues, 89% of the world rivers would be fragmented in some form, and this was just 43% in 2010. So what is the focus here is the dams that are created must focus on restoration, not on construction. So in the regions of Asia, Africa, South America, the construction issue dominates. However, in Europe, North America, it is basically removing the old unsafe damaging barriers and restoring the health of the rivers. So this directive was brought back in 2000, and in 2023 nature restoration law was brought to actually have an impact on nearly 25,000 kilometers of rivers which are running, to check any kind of ecological disruptions, endangered fishing, inland fishing industry, and checking any harm if to the local people and the local communities. The next and the last topic for the Down to Earth today is the policy landscape. So we are navigating a significant change, and under the NGT rulings, we are talking about emphasizing more on environmental laws. So if we focus on the untreated sewage discharge, it is very, very high, somewhere around 70% in Ghaziabad alone. This has a very critical gap for urban wastewater management. The pollution penalty is somewhere at around 21 crores, which has been imposed by UP Jal Nigam, and the forest land has been reclaimed for nearly 2,000 regions. Now, what is the proactive shift that we require is mainly in the form of waste to energy being simplified, with simplified documentations and better proposals that could be brought. So promoting local crops, reducing market reliance and better well-being would be some of those. So it's not just fair compensation or rehabilitation, but what is mandated by constitution is the fair compensation. We also need to work on rehabilitation, which is not under the policy issues but a very important path for green future in India. So focusing on eco-friendly approaches, renewable sources and climate resilient agriculture could be some of the way out. So thanks for joining. Have a great day. We'll be covering Down to Earth Yojana and Kurukshetra on regular basis. Thank you.